to live in, I seem to inhabit. I'm going to go with the atheistic universe because it doesn't require like another level of complexity on top of an already incredibly complex system.
It's the same complexity, though.
How is that?
So, I mean, we can sit here and talk shit about kooky ass Christians all we want, but
All right.
um, I mean, real talk. What he's talking about. What was it you said exactly? What was the first part you said?
It, who me?
Yeah.
I was just saying if I had to choose between two universes to live in, I choose to live in the atheistic universe because it requires less explanation. The system that explains it is
Why
more
do you?
complicated than the system that we inhabit.
I don't know why you think it's less complicated.
The universe that we live in is less complicated than the system that God must inhabit.
I think it's more complicated. It's more complicated to explain the world without the kooky ass cartoon Christian God. That's easy. God
Really?
does what
Because
he
I mean,
wants.
like
What God, the
explaining a
Christian.
place that's timeless and immaterial sounds a whole lot like nothing to me. So I
I
have a
think you
hard
guys.
time explaining that.
I think you guys are speaking past each other.
No, that's not
Um,
true.
I,
We're not.
I think you guys speaking past each other. What? Because it's easier to explain. It's less complicated. Because in one you have the universe, and the other one you have the universe and God. So maybe that's where you guys getting confused.
I'm I'm not confused by it. Could you mute anti-ordinary? We can hear the echo of the live feed back through your
Oh,
mic.
nobody can mute
It's live again.
anti-ordinary.
Yeah, I'm hearing myself, but I just said
Sorry.
you right now.
Sorry.
Yep, we are live again, people.
Um, right. So I mean, it's more complicated without God because God, the God Christian thing, it's really just the Christian worldview thing. God, their idea is that what God says and does is good, and God can do pretty much anything. Now you can quibble over, what's logically possible, or can God, you know, make the big ass rock that can't lift, whatever. That's just a bunch of nonsense. But the point is that that's the easy world to live in.
I think we are talking
Where
past each other. I think
no,
no.
we're
I think
not. There's no. Just
I think
listen.
no. I think Bob got it right. No, because
Oh,
one of us
okay.
is talking about like the conceptual way of talking about things, and I'm talking about um, because originally the conversation had been about the scientific method, so I thought that's what we were kind of still talking about. But
Yeah,
to
scientific
me,
method is far more complicated than God did it.
If I
yes,
guess in
you're
JJ in
right. You're
Thank you.
right. You are correct
And
for
we're
an
not
with
talking
explanation,
past each
having
other.
two different conversations. I was saying
for,
that a universe that God lives in is more complicated than the universe that I see, that I inhabit.
I don't understand why you keep saying that.
explain
Okay,
JJ, you're talking
because you
explanation
have to
wise.
take
If
the
you're gonna explain,
universe, because you have to take the universe as we observe it, and then add this omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, timeless, immaterial, infinitely whatever being that is God on top of it. That's more complex, isn't it?
No.
What do you
JJ
mean,
is
no?
saying no. Hang on. What JJ is saying is if you try to explain how it happened, trying to explain it the natural way, how could all these natural events could happen, or you can just say God did it. So yeah, if you're going to explain how it happened, God did it is the better and simpler. But if you're gonna try and put the two against each other, where a universe and a universe with a God, then a universe with a God is more complicated than just a plain universe. Looking at it at its face value.
Yes, you nailed it.
What?
and they
Swear to
say
God.
men can't listen. Like I said, we were literally having two different conversations. I'm glad you caught that and pointed that out to us.
I'm trying to show you how, you're kind of missing the point. You're claiming that you can have the universe, or you can have the universe plus God, and the universe plus God is more complicated. But you don't just have the universe. You're never going to just have the universe. You either have the universe plus God, or the universe and what explains the universe. That's far more complicated than the universe plus God.
I'm not following.
Okay. You're not posing a fair dichotomy. You're saying you can either choose the universe or the universe plus God. God here is the thing that explains the universe. But the other side of the equation is just the universe with nothing that explains it. So what you're
Well,
talking about is the universe plus the things that explain the universe that's not God, or the universe that's explained by God. And I'm telling you that the universe without God, the universe with everything that explains it without God, is far more complicated than the universe plus God. Now, did you
again,
follow?
I do follow, and I
Okay.
disagree. And here's why.
Okay.
Is you got an already super complicated system either way, right? Either way, with or without God, we both can agree on that. Super complicated system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's this explanatory thing that you're talking about?
What do you mean?
Well, you said that I wasn't making a fair dichotomy,
Yes.
and then you started adding a whole bunch of words to my supposition, which weren't there. Like, I didn't say an explanation. I said God. Again, we're having two different conversations here, apparently, because I'm taking it from a literal standpoint and going, okay, if your pet God exists, this highly complicates a already complicated system. And for the reasons that I think you even laid out with the whole suspension of the laws of reality causing miracles and things like that. Those sort of things are far more complicated than the system that we already observe. So
Me?
if
I
you
didn't
have
talk
to
about
add
miracles.
what?
I didn't talk about miracles.
Okay, that wasn't you then. I wasn't sure. So that's why I think I begin that sentence with I think or if. Like I
I don't know.
don't think I went. I don't think I went like that was a hill I was going to die on kind of sentence or anything. So yeah, I apologize if I got you mixed up with somebody else. But you got to admit that a world that is super complex without a God, and then you add on Converse Contenders, pet God, the Christian God, then that comes with its own kind of complexity and scaffolding that doesn't exist in nature. So you have to add that on top, and voila, you have a more complicated system than the one we currently observe, right?
So, right, you're replacing what explains the universe, which is what you're saying is complex, right?
You keep saying that, but I don't know that the universe owes anybody an explanation or necessarily comes with an explanation. So I'm not assuming that part. I'm saying here's the universe that we observe. Now add Converse Contenders, Pet God, with all the scaffolding and shit that comes with that on top of the system that we can observe. And you have a more complicated system than the system that we currently observe, right?
I'm not so sure that's true.
You're
It sounds
not
like
so sure that it
no.
doesn't complicate things unnecessarily to add in a divine agent that can at
Right.
will suspend the laws of reality. That doesn't complicate matters.
Well, especially if you don't know what the universe entails that you're saying is going to explain the
Well,
universe without
we
a
know
God.
for instance that people who are dead, like not just medically dead, maybe their heart stopped for a minute or they start breathing for a few minutes, but dead, they don't come back to life, right? Normally.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you add this complexity of a divine agent that can bring Lazarus back to life and Jesus back to life. He has like 500 zombies that rose up out of the ground in Jerusalem and ran into town telling everybody the big news. But we don't normally see that in nature. So I think it's a assumption people's part. I think they'd be safe to say come back to life when they're dead. Necessarily complicates things and adds when you have strings for his chosen few, right?
I don't see that as being adding complexity. A place of that
But
you're
there's
just
still complexity without him unless you're saying that his divine will keeps complex.
well, that's part of why people have these deities, these supernatural beings, is to take the place of the complexity of the system that we can't.
But it doesn't take it away. It just says Smurf, 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 Smurf. And you go, what does that mean?
No, come on.
Yes.
No, it
literally,
doesn't.
Smurf.
It takes the place.
Yes. Yeah. What do you normally call it when you have what would be a factual, let's see, what's a good word for it? Like a factual of instructions, right? Like say I have instructed to put this IKEA furniture together. Factual, like a factual explanation of how to put that together, or would you rather have, I don't know, like somebody just going
I don't know what you mean by Smurf.
Smurf? Well, I don't know what you mean by God. I guess if God has no explanatory, to me, God saying God did it has no explanatory power whatsoever. Like, congratulations.
Why?
Not an explanation. I mean,
What?
it's never been a good explanation, and when it's been
So a good explanation.
right, it's not good enough to put that furniture together.
What if it works?
But it doesn't.
Well, I think it has. I mean, I don't know why you can
I'm sorry. I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, how does the God hypothesis, how has that ever stood up under any kind of
under scrutiny? Well,
yeah, like when tested, when the God hypothesis for I guess a natural event, a natural occurrence, give me an example of a time that there was an experiment done, and sure enough, the God hypothesis, God did.
well, I'm not sure exactly what kind of scenario you're talking about. I might need an example.
Sure. Okay. We were talking about the Middle Ages earlier, when the scientific method started to rise up out of Europe, right? Prior to germ theory, and prior to, I guess, the humors theory, one of the main theories of disease promoted by the church was, demons. People could be possessed that would cause your ailments, especially for any kind of mental illness. So, the God hypothesis was proffered as an explanation for diseases and ailments, both physical and mental. It was later discovered that little tiny germs did it. And regardless of your piety or political affiliation, germs didn't care. They're just germs. They don't have any agency. There's nobody pulling strings and making them go places. They seem to follow all kinds of rules and laws and things like that. So the God hypothesis failed. Give me an example of a time where the God hypothesis didn't fail.
Oops, I was muted. I didn't exactly follow that. I was opening the thing. You said you're giving an example of a supernatural hypothesis, though, right?
Yes, I call it the God hypothesis, but sure, yeah, a supernatural hypothesis. Give me, but I mean, yeah, you feel free. It can be for your particular God if you have one, or a supernatural claim that was made that turns out sure enough.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't think of any examples either.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really my bag, but
So I
don't
mean,
think that was. I
I
don't
guess
think
my
that was
point
really
is
the
like
point.
that is a mountain of counter evidence.
In fact, kind of lost track of what the original point was.
Well, I mean, my point is that when
Oh,
you
it was
add
about
in a divine agency, I think you necessarily add in a layer of complexity.
Um, yeah, you don't think that we can explain everything in the universe, though.
Well, I know we can't at the moment. I'm not saying that that's going to be
Right.
true in the future.
Wouldn't expect you to.
I, yeah, I mean, and again, I don't know that outside of the kind of light horizon of our observable universe, that the laws of nature aren't different in that part of the universe that we can't see. I wouldn't even argue with you if you said God lives there. That's fine. He's been living in an ever shrinking universe, it seems, for a long time now. I guess give him some room.
Yeah, you said something about timeless and spaceless sounded like nothing to you, right?
Well, I mean, when I say nothing, give me some qualities of
No qualities. I mean,
that. Yeah, no qualities. You're right. Yeah, no time, no space, no material existence, no energy, no nothing.
right, nothing.
Yeah. So to me, when people describe God as being timeless and immaterial, that sounds a whole lot like nothing.
Well, it could, at least conceivably, still include, if it's timeless and spaceless, abstract concepts, things like love, desire, maybe intent. Those things don't
Well, I mean,
require space and time, do they?
I think we can superimpose because we haven't met any other intelligent races or species that we can communicate with. We oftentimes superimpose our own biases on nature and on our deities. And damn it, I was going somewhere with that. Shit.
Well, I'm just
Go ahead.
saying that
I'll come back.
those things don't require time or space, right?
Well, you need time to have a thought. Thought has a duration, and it moves electrically through your brain at the speed of light or less. So I would argue that you need time to have love, to experience love, or to think of love, or to feel love. You also need a space to do it in because I've never met a brain. A mind that could possess thoughts or feel emotions that existed outside of a brain. Although you could argue that some of these really smart AIs or chatbots or whatever are getting pretty close, but I've never met a mind outside of a brain.
Yeah.
Not saying that's not possible either. Just saying I've
Right.
never met one, and
Yeah.
I don't
Neither
see
have I.
how. Okay, so
But
no mind outside of a brain thus far, and so you need a space for a mind to exist in, and that mind is what's capable of experiencing emotion. I mean, you could probably feel love without a brain, I think, or not a brain, but without a mind.
but
You know, I
so
think like an animal doesn't have a human mind, but an animal can experience love, right?
yeah, I don't know.
You
But
don't know that an animal can experience love.
no.
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of, neuroscientists and neurochemists and people would disagree with you that a lot of those emotions that you laid out are biologically driven, and without certain hormones and glands, you wouldn't feel love or hate or anything. And then there are people who have those conditions that are alive today that don't feel those emotions. So,
What? Yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't know if cats feel love. But that's not the point. The point is that
yeah.
you said that something that was timeless in space, this would be nothing. But I'm just trying to establish that it could just be something abstract, some abstract concept like love or hate or any of these other things,
But I
because
mean,
those don't require space or time.
but they
Right?
require minds.
Oh, wow. Do they?
Well, I don't think love and hate exist like independently of
What's a
living
mind?
beings. A mind is a collection of thoughts and memories, experiences, your ego, your intellect, all kind of combined in together.
Right. So what if you don't have memories? Is it not a mind?
That is a really good question. I actually was listening to an NPR piece the other day about some people who can't create new memories, and there is a lot of debate about like the continuity of memory.
Right.
That a lot of your consciousness is an illusion that you kind of create to I don't know, like
Hmm.
it's kind of a collection of all these like different programming that
Were
you get
you listening to a
biologically.
neurologist?
I think so on NPR. Yeah,
Do you remember the name?
I don't.
You should look up a guy named Anil Seth.
Okay.
Anil is his first name. His last name is Seth. Seth. He's a neurologist, and he talks about uh, how we can physically map the mind. That's the kind of thing they work on, and describes it and says just that a lot of what we experience we make up. We fill in gaps because our minds, our brains, are prediction machines. Is one way he puts it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the more I learn about the brain, look, to me, there's enough things in the natural world that are just awe-inspiring. Like really give me that when Christians talk about like a religious experience. And I used to be a Christian, so I've had some of these moving emotions and stuff. You get carried away when a crowd of people are experiencing that kind of emotion, because we're social animals and we have
I
mirror neurons.
I have had
Um,
that at a Christian concert without being a Christian. Like
well, that's yeah.
I'd
You
never
don't
I've
have
never
to
been
be.
a I've never been a believer, right? But I went to church and I went to this concert. I don't know who the fuck it was, Petra or some shit. And I felt that even though I did not believe in no Jesus.
Right, but when you're surrounded by people and you have all those, I mean, music is a very emotional thing. That's why in a lot of
Yes.
videos they'll play music to stir certain emotions, and so to me, stuff like that just proves to me that that's all biological. It's hardwired into our brains and our nervous systems and our glands. That they've traced hormones that show that that you get the same like bonding hormones when you pet a dog as you do or hold a baby or something like that. Like, we're really a social species. It was like a survival advantage. That's why we are the way we are, is what a lot of scientists say, is because we were social and we worked together, and it gave us time to develop like better strategies, survival strategies, gave us bigger brains, and we had to be more cooperative. And but that's not like,
We're very complicated.
Yes, but these are all very kind of recent accumulations. And when I say recent, like in the past couple 100,000 years. And so in the grand scheme of things, like that's not in our nature. Our fundamental nature is much more aggressive and selfish and possessive and destructive. A lot of these negative traits that we associate with things negatively, and then the more
antisocial traits.
The antisocial traits, and then the more social traits are virtuous. We promote those in society. So if the religion, you made the argument, or what if the instructions help you put the furniture together, right? That was you that made that
Yes.
rebuttal? Okay.
What if it works?
What if it works? Okay. Well then, if something works, it works. I can't argue with that.
Can't argue with that.
That is, to me, like, that's kind of like how scientific theories and models work. They just work by virtue of working. If they can have predictive power and good explanatory power, and they're testable and repeatable and have a preponderance of evidence on their side, 100%. I'll also agree with those scientists who say that knowledge is incomplete. Doesn't make it wrong, because, well, it works. We can just have a better understanding of it that will lead to new science that we'll scratch our head at and go, well, I don't understand that. And then that will lead to new science. And that's how science works. But my concern with religion in the long run is that if you use the God hypothesis as the ultimate explanation, then when do you stop inquiring?
Inquiry of what? Of God?
Where do you start? Where do you stop inquiring into the nature of reality? Like, if you hit a wall and you go, I don't know, this is a tough one, and you go, well, God must have done it. Moving on. Like,
well,
we'll never
you're a pantheist. You're very comfortable saying that.
With what? God did it, moving on?
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was most theists in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I'm kidding, by the way. I know plenty of scientists, and I don't know how devout they are. I don't know that any of them are necessarily super devout or anything like that. But, most of them work for NASA. They're literally rocket scientists. A couple of them are Christian, or at least they are socially. I know they take their kids to church and their wife and all that stuff. So I know it doesn't necessarily make you retarded or anything. But I also live in a state where we have more churches than just about anything else. And we, lead the nation in illiteracy. We're ignorant and we're proud of it. And we're also one of the most, Alabama and Mississippi share a border, and there's not much difference between them.
There'll be some overlap.
JJ, I have a question for you.
Well, what up, Ming?
Believe it's possible to prove the supernatural empirically?
I don't even know what supernatural means. Actually, what I take supernatural to mean is by definition unexplainable. So no.
Okay. Thank you. I feel the same. I feel the same. I agree. It's not possible.
Supernatural is incoherent to me. I don't know what it means.
Yeah. And if it doesn't follow any rules and it's not testable or repeatable or predictable, I don't see how it could fall into the natural or scientific explanation or definition of anything.
That's what Converse Contender was getting at earlier. You can't prove the supernatural empirically.
You call yourself a naturalist?
Do not. I call myself a minor league philosopher.
No name?
Dude, I'm basically in the same boat, man. Like I used to back in the day, but it's been 20 years and I've been arguing with flat earthers until I was blue in the face, and I was like, you know what? I wouldn't
Why?
mind talking to some sane people for a little while. Why do you do anything? Because it's fun
don't
for a little while.
Yeah, I know a little while. But most of the rest of the time, it's not at all.
Friends have a easier time hanging out with me now because I get all my out on the so I'm a lot easier to live with is what I'm.
Oh, I gotta post this.
What I was getting at is I don't know what the definition of a naturalist is. I may or may not be one.
Oh, just look it up. Everything is explained by nature, by natural laws. I mean, I don't care if there are ones that we don't even know about yet. It's still nature. I don't know why would that be super nature?
It's like
I don't get it.
infamous. It's like extra famous, right?
So what's the difference between a philosophical and a methodological naturalist?
You should just read the wiki. But yeah, there is a distinction. And
All
people
right.
even make a distinction between naturalists. I mean, then there's physicalists and materialists. They're just kind of all the same to me, though.
Right.
Fact,
Yeah.
none of
I make me agree that I was basic by definition like a epistemologicalist. I really
A
confident
what?
about things. An epistemologist.
No. What about
Well,
epistemology?
The difference.
He
the
made
difference-
he pretty valid
Sorry.
argument to me, so I concede.
Hello,
that
hang on a second.
I think absolutely he's right. I can't go to a level of certainty that I am highly confident in and comfortable with.
Okay, so the difference between a philosophical naturalist and a methodological naturalist is the philosophical one says that there is no supernatural and everything is natural. And the methodological one says there might be something supernatural, but until there's proof for it, we can't assume it.
That's dumb.
So you need a method, basically. There has to be a method to show that it's supernatural.
Well,
Say there is
that would
no
probably describe me then.
And the philosophical one says there is no supernatural. Say again? Why is that, AJ?
What's that?
I followed. Oh, sorry.
I didn't say anything, did I?
I thought you said that was dumb. I don't know.
Oh, yes, methodological naturalism.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I don't know how. Supernatural just doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't know how you could even leave it open to a possibility.
Well, because you can't prove.
Incoherent.
Well, yeah, but you can't prove something which is unfalsifiable. Being
What?
unfalsifiable. Well,
Yeah,
the
but
supernatural,
those
almost by definition, is unfalsifiable unless you have a method for it.
well,
It
I
doesn't
think
exist.
that's the
Like-
point. The point is that it doesn't prove things.
Exactly.
Does
There's
supernatural
that.
here just mean unexplainable?
Uh,
I
mean,
always
'cause
thought
if
it was
that's
some
if
kind of
that's what that means,
suspension of the laws of reality.
that's dumb.
no, I don't think
Would it-
it's a mention of the laws of reality because, of course, that could be just unknown natural.
That would just be reality anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. So,
We're
like, say
talking
the
about-
planet stopped spinning for a day and then never did it again. We just have to go, well, we don't understand the science, but it may do it again one.
Yeah, I mean, what's supernatural about that other than we just can't explain it?
I think it's about the mechanism, isn't it?
That would be making a claim of the mechanism. Whereas
Yeah. So there are
supernatural
such
is,
That's the God hypothesis. That's what I keep on against.
yeah, it's dumb.
yeah, it's like saying, you can't prove God doesn't exist because God could be some kind of something outside the universe, in which case there would be no scientific way to prove that it didn't exist.
Well, if he's timeless and immaterial, then there's no way to prove that he exists.
Right.
Unless
So,
he has some
if
kind
that's
of
your definition of-
mindless, some kind of bodiless mind that can act in a discernible manner through natural means. But I mean, that just means that would also be indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah. So it seems to me that you're trying to prove a negative in this case, or trying to prove something which is unfalsifiable, doesn't seem possible. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it just to me it adds a more complicated thing on top of something that's already hard to explain and complicated enough as it.
Mm.
But it's like an infinitely stretchable elastic band, isn't it? I mean, it's just not to be agnostic. If you're going to take God out of the universe and have him not interact with the universe in any way, and just have him as some kind of I don't know, universe creator, for instance, right?
That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me either.
Well, I'm surprised if you think that God is the universe. I'm surprised that you think that God couldn't be the beginning of the universe.
I don't believe in the beginning. That's the part. That's the problem.
I see. Okay, I have to take that back then. I'm sorry.
Fair.
Yeah,
And that was an argument that you missed I made earlier when Converse brought that up about the beginning of time and space, and I was like, well, that's not really settled science or anything, man.
That's
You
why
know,
you
I
brought
mean-
up timeless and spaceless too, which is
Yeah. Well, those are
Mm,
those are characteristics that are oftentimes thrown at me by apologists. You know,
Sure.
they'll ascribe God certain characteristics, and
I'm familiar.
most Christian theists have those characteristics pretty much in common. I mean, I don't know too many Christian theists, or I don't know, that might sound redundant, but it's not, would argue that God is not omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, or at least maximally so, whatever that means, and also timeless and immaterial and eternal.
Mm-hmm. So it's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and you basically, I guess, self-created because he has no
Right.
creator. He popped into existence with all these characteristics, but he didn't pop into existence because he was always there.
Right.
And then at some point in his eternity, he decided to make the universe.
Right. And that's, I think, still going to be like the panentheist view. Maybe not necessarily. It'd be closer to that.
Yeah, it's still feasibly It's logically possible, though, that God could be this thing which destroys itself in the creation of the universe. In which case, you're never going to prove it, and in which case, you'd have to be agnostic to that idea. Would you agree with that, JJ?
No, I wouldn't agree to any of that. I wouldn't entertain such a
Think it's not logically possible?
bunch of nonsense.
Logically impossible.
No. You're making me think about
Yeah, considering we've just done 5 hours of DayZ, it's too much for me as well. But nonetheless,
I'm relaxing with these people I've never met before.
well, I should leave you to. I only wanted to say that point about methodological naturalism
Well,
being
I
slightly
appreciate
a
it.
slight distinction from philosophical naturalism, which is
Or metaphysical naturalism.
metaphysical naturalism. Maybe you would prefer to put it that way, which is that the no supernatural can exist, whereas.
Right.
If there is some proof, then yeah, sure, it becomes more natural, you might say. And I guess that would be an objection to the methodological naturalism. But I don't think it's much. But mainly because of things, for my mind, mainly because of things like virtual particles, which seem to me almost impossibly unfalsifiable, other than, they're kind of required to make the standard model work. I bulk at slightly and I go, okay, well, there is some evidence there, but it's mathematical evidence. It's not physical evidence. It's not like we can measure them or actually, although there is one Russian experiment, I believe, which shows the effect, the Casimir effect, is it, or something like that. There's a subtle distinction between the two, and it's useful for atheists to use that argument of methodological naturalism to avoid some of the pitfalls of naturalism, which seems to, or some philosophers tell me, has been thoroughly debunked. As I'm sure you're aware, JJ. I mean, Danny keeps coming in to saying this stuff about naturalism being impossible, etc.
Has he been doing that? I'll have to spank him.
To me, it's just a weird argument. Like, to me, I don't know. I've heard this argument a few times bandied about that if you concede that, this God concept that I've laid out a few times is possible, can exist in a possible universe, then God must exist in all possible universes. And I don't know, man. I just keep coming back to this. Like, yes, I guess you can logic into a logical argument you want, but I've never, to me, it's never been demonstrated somebody logicking something in reality. Like, just, I'm going to use logic to shit something into reality.
Yeah, I mean, by logic, you I guess you mean a deductive argument, do you?
Yes.
What was that argument you just said? Some modal argument for God?
It's one of the 5 ways, isn't it? Or I can't remember who did it, but one of the Aquinas.
Is that one of those? I don't remember that shit.
Or maybe Anscombe or someone. But if a maximum, if you describe God as a maximal being, then he must exist in some possible universe, and if he exists maximally in some possible universe, then he would exist in all universes.
Uh-huh. I guess it depends on what those words mean.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a pretty logical argument to me, but again, I don't have a problem conceding that God is a logical possibility. I mean, I don't think it's much of a concession, to be perfectly honest. But maybe. Welcome, Laura.
Hello there. How you doing?
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
It's Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Hi there. How you doing, Simon?
mate. Not bad. We need to meet up sometime, of course, but hopefully we'll make it in the summer.
Yeah, I'm looking to come down to London for the Alexandria Palace show at the end of March, I think it was.
Oh wow! Okay, okay. Well, it's my birthday time, so my treat, and we'll go out somewhere.
Yeah. I'm thinking about
Excellent.
staying over in and doing a couple of days down there. So
yeah, fab.
it's possible. I don't know how possible yet, but
okay. Well, we can talk, and we can arrange something. I'm sure. So that would be good. I've been up for like quite a few hours, so I might be a bit tired right now. I might not be speaking total sense, so forgive me, JJ, if I messed a few things up.
I don't think so. I was surprised to see you.
Yeah, no, I heard someone talking about something and it piqued my interest, and I was lying awake, and then I started waking up as soon as I lay down. It's like,
here we go. 21st, 22nd March is the show.
Oh, okay, cool.
Is there more? Is there more than one Aquinas?
Thomas.
Thomas Aquinas
is the
somewhere
one.
in Italy.
Oh.
Well, there's also Empiricism Aqueous Solutions, which is not quite the same thing, but he probably thinks they are because he can't spell.
I thought Simon said earlier one of the Aquinas.
Oh no, there's another one called Anscombe or someone like that, who also came up with some argument, a couple of arguments. I think he might have come up with the argument from contingency. I can't remember right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he meant one of Aquinas's arguments.
Yeah.
The 5 ways, yeah. That's probably what I would do. Yeah.
I found Aquinas's arguments to be really, really pathetic, really. It's like, I'm trying to remember what they were now. But it's...
That's the main 5, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got to look it up now. Forgotten.
Yeah. Quite a long time ago, I think. He's probably 1500s, maybe.
I thought it was the 1600s.
It could have been the 1600s as well. I don't really know.
Thought it was for.
I know he.
I was thinking more like.
Oh no, 1300s.
I was thinking more like 1350.
It's better.
I know he did something about trying to reconcile the East and Western churches. He spent his last years doing that, and then he managed to come up with a load of theological stuff to combine them back together again, and then they went to war. So yeah, the biggest genius the church has ever had, and it got wasted. Always an irony, which I like. Anyway, yeah, sorry to go. No name. You there?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I'm stuffing my face with toast. I've got the munchie.
Sorry. Yeah. That's a good idea, actually. I'm going to go and get a cup of tea and some toast too.
Yeah, my munchies will probably kick in pretty soon here.
You lucky bastard.
I've been smoking on this stuff called gelato for the past few days. Oh, so good.
Is it vape or you're smoking actual bud?
Bud.
Oh, really?
Huh?
I just assumed it would be some form or consistency, some form of
it's some kind of hybrid. Resin grows it. It's just a hybrid strain.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 17% THC, no paranoia. It's good vibe.
Right on. And you're in Alabama or Mississippi?
Alabama, yeah.
Is it legal there yet?
Oh God, no.
I didn't think so.
In some places in Birmingham, they won't arrest you if you've got less than an ounce.
Right.
Okay, I found the first one. So it's the Unmoved Mover. And it's basically, there must have been a prime mover, and that prime mover is God. Because things don't come out of, things don't come into existence from nothing.
I agree with that.
You know, it's like whatever's changing must be changed by something else, and what's changed by that is changed by something else, and something else is changed by you know, and this chain can't be infinitely long, so there must be something that causes change without itself changing, and that's God.
See, I
Well,
don't
that's a
agree with the
nice
part-
assertion. How do you demonstrate that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
all
God
that
wouldn't
is,
agree
though,
with
is
the
an
part
assert-
where it says it can't be infinite, though. That's the only problem I find with that.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like, yeah, it can't be infinite, so therefore God did it. Well, that's great assertion. How do you demonstrate that? That's not a proof. That's just an
I have no
assertion
problem
that, you know,
Read
I mean,
that.
that's basically creating I can't answer that, therefore God.
Mm,
Because
That's
you
basically-
can't have something come from nothing except for God.
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Isn't that
God
special
doesn't come from
pleading?
nothing either.
Yeah, God's an exception from the nothing thing, and it's just a bogus argument. And of course, you know, when we look at physics, you know, effectively, when physicians that does sound wrong. What do you call physicists? When physicists, you know, when it comes down to the math, they basically say to themselves, "Okay, infinity doesn't work. That means your math's wrong." That's basically the way they don't like infinity as a concept, because it's like, no, it's got to be a 1 or a 0 type thing. You know, it has to have an actual number kind of thing.
Well, that's not true. There's plenty of graphs that plot towards infinity. And,
Yeah.
a lot,
But
of,
fi-
lot
but-
of different calculations that, and infinity's not a number. It's more of a, yeah, like you said, a concept. And it's a toughie because we're kind of limited monkeys. You know, I mean, we think we're real smart, but you know, we're just smart by comparison.
Laura is correct, however, in physicists struggle with infinity.
Yeah, like I say, it's usually a sign that they got the maths wrong. And so,
Oh, so if their answer comes out infinity.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
it's
see.
usually okay. I've gone and done something wrong here, you know, because there is an answer. I mean, even if the answer is very, very long, you know, an example would be pi. You know, somewhere down the end of the chain, there's bound to be an answer somewhere. You know, but
I don't think so. I mean, it describes a part of a circle, and circles don't have an end. I think it just
Yeah.
wraps back around.
Yeah, with the things that physicists typically study, they're not going to like infinity. But if we're talking about the beginning of the universe or an infinite regression of contingencies,
mm,
that's not really something physics has tackled.
well, it kind of is, because, you know, generally physicists don't say nothing. They don't believe in a nothing. They believe in a
Right.
something. And the
Or
thing
what?
is, the something. So one of the things that can happen, you know, that does happen, sorry, is that energy can be turned into, also matter can be turned into energy, and energy can be turned into matter.
Hmm.
You know, so we can see that, you know, the second in black holes, and you know, lighting a match is turning something into, you know, sorry, turning, you know, matter into energy. You know, the matter being the matchstick, and the energy being the fire, you know, and the heat that comes from it. So, my way of thinking about it, and it's something I got from Michio Kaku, which is the idea of like, I'm going to use a word nothing, but it's not a literal nothing.
Mm.
If you can imagine a vacuum in space, there's no 3 dimensions here. It's, you know, so what happens is you have bits of energy floating around in a vacuum. And then what happens is some of those interact together, and you know, that energy becomes matter. And there's your Big Bang.
Right.
So it's not an actual nothing, it's just a not very much of something. And the problem that we have to remember is that when we think of time, the idea of what comes before the Big Bang is a nonsensical concept, because the idea of time didn't exist until the Big Bang occurred, until there was the three dimensions effectively. So the idea of past, present, and future exist in the same space, so to speak. If you hold three fingers up in front of you, and you imagine like the one on the left is the past, the one in the middle is the present, and the one in the right is the future, and you rotate your hand 90 degrees, they're both in a line. They're both the same thing at the same time, so to speak. So the idea of a past coming before the present, or the future, it becomes circular effectively. So they can exist at the same time, and then the same point, shall we say, and then as soon as the Big Bang occurs, now these are separate things, as opposed to the same thing. Does that make sense?
Man, I had a physicist
Not
try
really.
to explain like the B theory of time the other day.
This is this is it.
Right.
And yeah, no, I that's why I made that point, because what you're talking about, it's some kind of like 4-dimensional kind of lattice structure that if you were, I guess, a 5th-dimensional being would look like a static object to you with a beginning, middle, and an end, or like an object, right? It would have its own weird set of dimensions to it that are imperceptible to us because we're 3-dimensional. I mean, we go through time, but we only go through it in one direction.
Yeah, we operate in a linear existence.
Yeah.
I mean, a part of it. Do you remember Star Trek: Deep Space Nine? And you've got the wormhole aliens, and they're confused about the idea of linear time. What comes before now is no different than what is now, or what is to come.
I don't remember them.
That it was in the very first
that
episode.
It just seems so like deterministic, and I don't know. I mean, it seems like Brownian motion, and again, I'm not a physicist, so I don't understand a lot of these concepts deeply, but like the uncertainty principle and the measurement problem and things like that kind of all argue that it's not predetermined, that things just kind of randomly bounce around and happen, and they happen in just like a cause and effect sort of way, and that our perception of time is just things moving through space.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, of course, if you've ever heard about the I forgot what it was called now, fine tuning argument, how effectively you've got 5 knobs, like on a graphic equalizer or something, for music or something, and if any of those knobs is out by ever so slightly a degree, then the universe couldn't happen. The Big Bang occurs and it would fizzle out immediately. Nothing would really happen, or it would expand and then it would have wouldn't have enough to keep going, and then it would start to contract, and then implode on itself, so to speak. And of course, one of the other things about that is that when matter goes to the point of singularity, that it becomes repulsive. So effectively, it pushes back out again. It's the big bounce theory. I don't know physics. I've only gone off stuff that I picked up over time. But but the second...
I took physics in college 25 years ago, and I remember F equals MA, and well,
I probably couldn't do it because I'm really rubbish at maths.
It's been a minute. You know what? Arguing with flat earthers brought back so much, I would say, middle school science, even shit that I hadn't thought about in 30 some odd years.
Yeah.
And so when you're forced to think about those things, you have to go back and look them up,
Mm-hmm.
and it really helps you reestablish like a basic framework.
Mm.
You know, like my understanding of Newton's laws were really sketchy, you know, and going back and being forced to have these conversations. Well, I say forced, I've made myself do it, but having these arguments with flat earthers forced me to go actually get a bit of a, you know, refresher course on, you know, college stuff or high school stuff that I hadn't done in forever.
Now, I've got to ask you a question. Don't think I'm insulting you. I've got to ask the question, though. Why do you spend your time dealing with stupid people with stupid ideas about the Earth being flat, despite all the evidence that it isn't?
Ooh, gosh. Okay. So they just kind of replaced fundies for me. I used to argue with young Earth creationists and, you know, biblical literalists and people like that
Mhm.
back in the day on Facebook.
Right.
And I got away from them, and to me it seemed like kind of a break to argue with flat earthers. And
I don't understand how that is
after a couple of years, I've heard every flat earth argument. They pretty much all devolve down to nuh-uh or I don't understand.
Yeah.
So it's gotten to the point where it's just no fun anymore. You know, I can be a faux flat earther better than the average new flat earther who comes in, you know, and doesn't know what traps to avoid, rhetorically speaking.
They remind me of 9/11 truthers.
Yes. Oh God, I can't even talk to them. I really have a hard time with hoaxers in general. I get triggered very easily.
Before I got involved in
cousin who lost a leg in the Boston Marathon.
Mm.
And when I found out, I didn't even know about hoaxers until that. And then when people started talking about crisis actors and hoaxers, and I'm like, my cousin Will lost his leg below the knee.
Yeah.
That's a lie. You're paid to say that. They gave you $1,000.
Oh yeah, oh God, yeah. If I had the shill money from George Soros, NASA, the Clinton campaign, the Sanders campaign, whoever, yeah, I've been a paid shill, right? That's why I fix robots in a factory.
Hey, so do I. Fun.
I mean, I think the funniest thing I've ever seen with the 9/11 truthers, and it's a great story. So, before I got involved in the Great Debate stuff, I used to sort of go on with those guys. You know, it's just amusing sometimes. You know, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, look, this is simple. I mean, like, for example, you know, there's the one about the wings, a bit of wing missing. You know, when you look at individual frames, you can see, oh, the wing disappears and then reappears.
Oh, right.
And that's proof that it's video edited.
I've seen loose change, and I've talked to a couple of hoaxers and ran away because I can't.
Now, the answer to that one is no, that's just how video cameras work. Because what happens is when a video camera films something, it's not like a cine film where it's literally got light hitting, you know, the film and then printing it effectively. It is some, you know, data that is being recorded on a videotape. Or
right, it's a bunch of
whatever
lightning,
media. I mean, today it's smart cards.
Digitized into a magnetic, media.
Yeah. So what happens is at 30 frames per second, the human eye can't tell. But what happens is when you got the plane turning, at one point the sky and the wing are the same color. It can't tell the difference. And so it just removes it, and then, oh, there's a contrast there, right, pops it back in again.
Yeah, it's just
so it's not evidence that the wing disappeared or it was edited. It was just evidence of that's how video cameras work. Because at 30 frames per second, the human eye can't tell, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
And I'm sure that
you
if
get weird effects like that all the time on
camera. I'm sure if you watched a football game or an American football game, you know, where the snap happens and he's about to throw it and his arm's moving and his fingers disappear into the ball.
Oh, yeah.
You know, things like that. But anyway, so the funniest one for me was so. Did you see the one where the BBC announced that Building 3 had collapsed before it had?
I've heard that claim. Yeah.
It is an actual claim. It's true. It happened. Okay. What happened was Jane Stanley is stood with a window behind her, and she's saying, there's a third building that's collapsed. It's the Solomon Brothers building, yada yada yada. It's World Trade Center 7. Okay. But over the shoulder, you can see over her shoulder, the building's still there. And what had actually happened was that Reuters news agency, so the way these news agency systems work is that, if something happens in Addis Ababa, there probably isn't going to be some journalist somewhere, like from the BBC or ABC or NBC or whoever, So what happens is they get it from a local news reporter from there. And it gets put on the feed, and it gets sent out all over the world, and then people can, put it in their, newspapers or, websites, or read it out on the news, things like that. If it's something significant, well, next thing you know, there's someone on a plane from South Africa who then goes to Addis Ababa to, report live on what's happened. A plane crashes in Bumsville, Idaho. Same kind of story. Someone from the Idaho Gazette or something, or wherever, your Bumsville Gazette goes out there, and and then it gets put on the feed, and then it gets spread all over, and then that's when your local news, your big news will turn up, or something like that. So that's how the system works. Well, apparently, what happened was Reuters news agency sent out a thing that building number 7 had collapsed, and they were getting the information from fire crews on the ground, and they were saying, like, there's video of this. Watch that building; it's coming down. And the reason is the water mains had been destroyed by the 1 and 2 collapsing, and they couldn't put the fire out, and there was no one in danger, so they just let it burn. That was it, and then the building collapsed. Okay. So
yeah, it's they made an accurate prediction. And
well, what happened?
What
happened on this?
Got it wrong?
Yeah. So what actually happened was that they put the information out that it had collapsed when it was actually only going to collapse. And it's probably one of those things, like a canteen or something like, when you're a kid at school, and like the dinner room or whatever is like really noisy, and a teacher goes quiet, and then it goes quiet, and then gradually it increases loud again. So you can imagine on a busy day with news all over the place. I mean, at one point there were 20 planes that had been hijacked. It wasn't the case.
Oh,
it
was
was just people who hadn't responded.
It was chaotic. It was media frenzy. I mean, I remember. I was at work that day. It was stamped in my brain.
So my guess, and it is a guess, but my guess is that on a busy Reuters news that day, with information all over the place, people shouting, all that kind of stuff. And what happens is someone said building number 7's coming down, and someone says building 7's come down. Yeah. Effectively, one went from coming to come, and off it goes on the internet, and next, people reported it, and there were about half a dozen news groups that reported it had collapsed. So BBC weren't any different than, several others. Well, so that's basically why that mistake happened. Mistakes happen in the press. Anyway, so someone made a video, and they said that the reason why the BBC announced the building had collapsed an hour early, was because the clock change. And this is a 3-day thing. So I posted a reply saying, bit of a problem. The clocks change in October. This is September. So the next day I get up, and there's a reply, and they were insisting it's because the clock change. And I was a bit sarcastic. I said, it's a nice conspiracy with only 2 problems. 1, the clocks change in October. And 2, the clocks change in October. Now, I know that strictly speaking, it's only 1 problem, but I thought it was such a big problem, it was worth mentioning twice. The following day I wake up, it's sarcastic, okay? But the following day I wake up, and the story has changed slightly. The reason why they announced it early was because they were using European time. So they announced it an hour early, but they were using European time.
That's like those weird European measurement units y'all use, like meters and
Yeah. Now,
kilometers and stuff.
now here's the thing,
Nobody
though.
can
This
count.
is what makes it stupid, because the BBC at 0 hours GMT will use European time time at +1 hours to talk to their New York office at -5 hours in a room full of clocks. Because the BBC News Centre was a circular room at BBC Television Centre in West London, and all the way around it had clocks with different cities written underneath them. So what would happen is, if you want to know what time it is in, San Francisco, you look all the way to the right. To the left. If you want to know what time it is in New York, you look to the one a bit more to the, more towards the center, so to the right. To the left. If you want to know what time it is in Singapore, you look to the right and you see what time it is, and so on. And so you just look around the room for the city in that zone, and you can just get it exactly there. So, but what I learned from that, and I bet the flat earthers are exactly the same: never let the reality get in the way of a good conspiracy.
Have you not spoken to any flat earthers?
No. I like I say, I think it's a rather stupid thing to, and if you want to spend the time doing it, I don't know, go ahead. But for me, I personally think it's a waste of my time to deal with stupid people about stupid concepts that have been, ruled out by Pythagoras.
I agree. It is totally a waste of your time. There are plenty of things that I enjoy doing, like, I don't know, anything on YouTube.
Slitting your wrists?
I could be doing, sir?
Slitting your wrists?
Sure.
I mean,
I'm just saying, there's all kinds of time sinks out there. Some are more pleasurable than others, granted. And not everybody drinks the same cup of tea, So, at the end of the day, I enjoyed it for a while. I have begun to lose my taste for it. And I got this invite from, I think it was Metal Slugs Master, to hop in here. And a guy was arguing natural means, like theism position.
Mhm.
And I got sucked into that. So that explains why I'm here.
Right. It does, like I say, I don't understand why people deal with flat earthers. The thing about it is, religious people, well, these are people that are actually can affect other people's lives.
Well, I would argue that science deniers, which, they're not all flat earthers. Some are concave earthers, some are hollow earthers, it's a sphere, but it's a geostationary, the universe revolves around us, sort of things that were debunked.
Heliocentric. Yeah.
No, geocentric.
Sorry, geocentric. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's what I meant.
Yeah. So, they're pretty much just science deniers, which is no different from a young earth creationist or a biblical literalist, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And they do influence people, because you've got kids on YouTube who get on there and they see some influencer, some Logan Paul guy or whoever, talking about Nathan Oakley talking about the flat earth. And it's such a, I don't know, it's the uber conspiracy, and they are religious in this respect. Like, they think that NASA, as just a coverall term for all the different space agencies, are all run by NASA. Even our enemies, Russia, China, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
NASA runs them all. That NASA is this shield organization that, I guess, the satanic Illuminati set up to promote the heliocentric lie and the globe Earth lie, to hide God, because the Bible says God created it this way. And in this, I guess, one interpretation, it's flat. And so there's a firmament, there's a dome, there are all these things that disagree with the observations that we all make.
Yeah.
But they have mastered this kind of postmodernist what is truth kind of approach to an argument that will nitpick and dissect every word, lead you down this red herring rabbit hole filled trail of straw man arguments and just arguments from incredulity and arguments from nuh-uh sometimes. That it just, I mean, you know, like I said, it used to be fun. I've run into all the arguments. I've had them all. There's nothing new. It's just not fun anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I have an argument against the flat Earth position. It's pretty simple. It's the flat Earth one. You know, there's that picture with, you know, like a circle with a donut of ice around it. That one.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you can get on a plane and you can fly from Santiago, Chile to Australia. And it takes, I think, something like 11 hours. And that is on the opposite side of the disc.
Oh, yeah.
You're flying over Europe to get to it. And you can do that in 11 hours. But you can't
There's no working flat Earth map. There's
Yeah.
no working flat Earth model. There's never been one produced. I mean, I think this.
Well, hang on. I just need to finish the second part, though.
Sorry.
But you couldn't, until recently, you couldn't even fly from London, which is roughly in the middle-ish part, to Australia. You couldn't even get that far. You had to stop at Kuala Lumpur to refuel. Now you can make it. But even then, it takes 21 hours or something or other. I think it is. You know, it's a crazy amount of time. And it's like, you know, what is the argument against that? And the thing about it is, you know, people could say,
there is
well, they're
no
flying around in
argument.
circles or
There's
whatever. It's like,
There is no argument against it. I mean, they'll tell you things like, "Oh no, look, even the pilots aren't in on this. See, all these automatic autopilot systems and all these navigation systems and stuff, they're all programmed to do these routes and everything that don't really involve the pilot at all, right? And the pilot isn't even aware of the conspiracy, right? Because we'll have pilots, real, you know, airline pilots and shit come in because the flat earthers will make these crazy arguments. And then the airline pilot will be like, oh no, there's this thing called a great circle course or a great circle route. And that only works on a globe. Like here he laid out a map, like an AE map, and was like, okay, so try to plot this course from this place to this place on this map. And the guy did. And then he was like, okay, let me show you how we do it on a great circle route. And he just pulled it up on his computer, and sure enough, he had this little great circle route. You just click on one city and click on another one, and it showed the route. It was like, okay, this matches with reality. This is exactly how far this place is away, and it's exactly how long it'll take to get there. Oh, nope, you're going to end up in South America. Planted in a mountain, probably.
yeah.
You know, and that's, I mean, there is no way to navigate. Like, we ask them all the time, it's like, okay, why don't we have any pictures of this ice wall? And they're like, oh, United Nations and the Antarctica Treaty and all this stuff, you know, they hide, they have all these warships and they'll keep you away. I'm like, where are pictures of these warships? Like, we've never gotten an airplane or a boat. You flat earthers have never gotten a boat close enough to the ice rim where you could get a picture of these like UN warships patrolling the ice wall to keep people away. And you can buy a ticket. You can go. It costs you like $12,000 roughly. And you can go and check it out. And they're like, oh no, they only take you to this peninsula and there's minders and they don't let you go far. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's fucking Antarctica. Like, they want some dumbass tourist just getting lost and dying on their watch.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, it's just a waste of time worrying about them. They are not harming anybody. They're just howling at the wind unless you give them attention.
Again, I disagree because their platform on YouTube is huge and they reach a bunch of impressionable kids, and that kind of science denial, I think, has a retarding process on a developing mind.
Isn't that more an indictment of your education system?
I think it's more of an indictment on the formation of the human brain.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
No, it's not harmless because there was a family at my kid's school that were flat earthers. So my kids heard stuff from their classmates. And, they get in the car, we're driving like 20 miles away. Why does the earth look flat? Look out. So I explained, well, for one thing, it's huge, and we're only seeing a small portion of it. So, yeah, we're not seeing like everything. And I was like, well, you can also look at, the way the clouds move, like, measurements. And I explained like how certain measurements to see how, like with the shadows and everything, see that they're actually. So I went into like this big, huge thing, like all these experiments they can do and what they can look at. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then that was it. So it's not just these yahoos on.
Mm.
Don't get me wrong, they're not as dangerous, in my opinion, as anti-vaxxers
Oh yeah, they're bad.
or creationists or whatever you want, intelligent design advocates who try to get intelligent design taught in the classroom. But it's the same kind of thought process. Like they want, if not the flat earth taught in the classroom, they want the controversy taught. They want it to be taught that there is an ongoing debate about the shape of the earth, that you can call all this scientific evidence into question, that you don't trust the authorities, you don't trust the government, you don't trust the establishment. And I mean, don't get me wrong, like there's a healthy dose of skepticism where whenever you give power to authority is called for. Like that's your duty as a citizen if you live in the kind of country where you have a voice in who your elected officials are. But they promote like that kind of anti-science Luddite kind of philosophy, and I think to me that's really destructive.
It's a weird thing that's happened though. I mean, do you remember 1950s sci-fi movies? And you had
yeah.
the scientist guy who basically beat the aliens or whatever. It's it is that kind of thing that has changed, that it's like, oh, we're harnessing the nuclear, the atom, to make energy and things like that. And that was like the peak of science. And now it's kind of gone to dumbassery.
Well,
I also have to deal with like the uber Christian influence too. So like there was super Christian family. I felt bad for this kid. I want to be there on day one. So that poor kid.
So you want to be there for day one for what?
Because he wanted to meet Jesus.
Oh,
This little
right.
kid. It's like a first grader. I was just like indoctrinated. But I had this is way years ago. My son got in the car, was in front, and he said, "Well, who created the world? Was it God, Jesus?" And I was like, what? And I'm like, neither. And then I went to a 2-minute explanation about how the universe that we know of, like how it was created, like how it, well, not created, but how it came. And he was like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, I have to like combat this stuff like for the rest of their lives. Actually, now, oh no, my son is 12 and he's ready to debate people on theism on online, and I'm like, no, not gonna happen.
Yeah, I had to do the same thing one time with my daughter, and I didn't want to. I mean, she was a kid. She was like 7, 8 years old, and I was not particularly devout even when I was, when I got back into Christianity in my early 20s, because that's what my ex-wife, kind of wanted. And so I was always half-hearted about it. And I mean, once I got back in, but my daughter, she liked the social aspect of it, date the Bible school and all that crap. And so I let her go. I didn't have a problem with it. But yeah, one day when she asked me a similar question, I kind of broke down, kind of a big overview picture of what, we had pretty good evidence for.
Mm.
And I was like, and she goes, well, I mean, that didn't really answer my question. I was like, what do you mean? She goes, well, you didn't say anything about God or Jesus. And I was like, well, that's because there's no evidence for that.
Well, my
Yeah.
kids, like, they never. The only exposure is, and they're just like, don't. You know?
Sometimes I envy ex religious people who just discovered atheism, so to speak, because I've never had that. I've never been a believer, so I've never had an awakening, shall we say?
I
Yeah,
I always question everything.
Yeah, I take atheism to be incoherent.
Sorry, say it.
I'm saying I
Yes.
take atheism to be incoherent.
Yeah,
Okay.
you've been saying that in the chat.
No, well,
Yeah,
I
aren't
mean,
you guys curious?
No, not really.
I'm curious. Why? Well, you question everything. Then somebody says atheism is incoherent. You're like, nah. Like, really? You just got done saying that you
Well,
question everything.
Probably because I've heard it on Tom.
well,
Tom's
I
channel.
should. Well, I should
I've heard
clarify.
it 100 times on Modern Day Debate, and so
Well, I should clarify. The type of atheism that I'm referring to is natural. I think naturalism is incoherent. Because if you're
Okay. Why?
Why? Well, I think naturalism can't account for normativity.
how so?
Well, I take normativity to be something that you can be either in or out of accord with. So, like beliefs, for example. And because what makes them normative is that they have the potential to fail. But however, things that I take to be physical, right, or natural, are going to be things that follow law-like relations, right? And so, under naturalism, the atheist who holds to naturalism can't account for beliefs or like desires or anything like that.
Well,
I don't see how. I mean,
Well, what don't you understand?
Well, I mean, I can justify why I have a desire for something, and it completely involves naturalism.
No, you're
I
missing.
can do the same thing
a
with.
desi-
I can do the same thing with belief.
Look, but a desire and a belief can't be physical because by definition they don't follow law-like relations.
Have you ever met a mind that existed outside of a brain?
I don't see why that's relevant.
Well, I'm not asking for relevance. I'm asking you, have you ever met a mind outside of a brain?
Well, the idea is that the question that you're asking is an epistemic question, but I'm bringing up a conceptual issue, so I don't understand how the question.
I'm also bringing up a conceptual issue, if you will allow me.
So
Have
why are
ever
you bringing
met
up notions of epistemology?
Have you ever met a mind outside of a brain? Simple yes or no question.
I've never met a mind outside of a brain, though.
Yes. Okay. So a mind is necessary for those desires and beliefs, correct? Yes or no?
Mind. Yeah, sure.
Okay. And a brain is necessary for a mind.
Yeah, there's a dependency relation between the two. Yeah.
Okay. So with that being said, do desires and beliefs exist outside of a mind?
No, they don't. Because beliefs
Okay.
under the
So then they
view.
don't exist outside of a brain either.
No, well, the idea is that when you
And a
say
brain is a
where,
natural organic
well,
thing.
hold on,
So
right?
I
When you
don't
say,
see
well,
how
hold
I
on,
haven't explained desires
well, hold on,
under
right? So,
naturalistic
like,
world.
I don't understand, like, your question, right? Because when you ask, like, where do beliefs or what
Well,
are
that's
beliefs?
you're being intellectually dishonest if you say you don't understand my question.
No, the reason why, well, I'll explain, right? And then we can evaluate whether or not I'm being dishonest, right? The reason why it doesn't make any sense is because that's going to beg the question against the not naturalist, right? Because beliefs are going to be taken to be objects that don't have a spatial. So to say that where do beliefs come from or where are they based on, right, doesn't make any sense.
Does a neuron take up a space?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I take
Well,
beliefs to be
there's your
separate
space.
from neurons.
Well, I don't. So
How?
you can
I mean,
say
if
that all you
brains don't
want.
work without, sorry, if beliefs don't happen without brains to think them, shall we say, to believe them, then what you're arguing is not incoherent.
Well, look,
What
I
you
just
are arguing is incoherent, not what I am arguing is incoherent.
Well, look, what I'm
No,
saying
what he
is
was-
that I take the mental, right, to be dependent on the physical. So that means you can't have the mental without the physical. So like there are
would
going to
be
be certain,
naturalist, right?
well, right, well, you're going to be certain physical facts, right, that are going to inform your beliefs, but your beliefs in and of themselves are going to be immaterial. They're not
They're
going
going
to
to
be
be
physical.
stored in your brain in a physical place. They're not actually immaterial.
But how can that happen with normativity?
Because if you get a
Neural
railroad
transmitter and neural receivers, it's simple
if you
as
get a
that.
railroad spike through your frontal lobe, it'll change who you are. It'll change your beliefs.
Right.
Trust me.
That's not going
I've
to
read
but that's
the
not
journal.
right, but that's not going to be incompatible with what the dualist is saying, though, because the dualist is granting that.
Oh, so you're saying it's evidence of both. That's just like a flat earther going, well, that observation works on a flat earth too. Well, no, it doesn't. Because
No,
you
I'm just saying. I'm saying what you're saying isn't an
demonstrate
objection.
a mind that exists without a brain. Your objection is over.
Well, no, I wouldn't be demonstrating it, right? Because demonstration has to do with is going to be construed in terms of empirical matters. What I'm
Which is
bringing up isn't.
necessary under the naturalistic worldview. So how is it incoherent or incomprehensible?
Well, look, what I'm arguing is that the naturalist can't account for beliefs. He wants to say that there are beliefs.
That's not
but then,
okay. Well, A, that's not true, and B, so
why is that not true?
what? Because I just laid out the case for it, and you're just hand waving it with dismissal away.
Well, I'm pointing out that what you laid out wasn't actually an adequate objection to the view.
Oh, so it's not a, see, you're just shifting the goalpost is what you're
Wait,
doing.
what goalpost did I shift? In order for me to shift the goalpost, I would have to lay out an argument, but I just expressed the view.
No,
But
you said
your
you
argument.
said
Hang on,
we
you have an
couldn't- you said
argument.
we couldn't explain, and when we did, you said that wasn't an adequate explanation. So that's a
Right,
goalpost shift.
because you didn't understand you didn't understand the view that I was explaining. Right, and so your objection to that view was misplaced. That's all I was pointing out. Right, all I was saying is that what the dualist wants to argue is that the
Well,
reason why it's
you
called
waited until I stated you waited
go ahead.
until I voiced that objection before you brought up dualism. So like that's a different argument, I guess, from the earlier one that
dualism-
said the atheistic worldview was incomprehensible or
Well, I made
incoherent.
a specific claim. I said naturalist atheists who hold to natural. I made that
Metaphysical,
specific
methodological, or philosophical natural.
metaphysical naturalism, obviously, because
Oh,
methodological.
okay. So yeah, that's the one that we agreed on earlier. Was the door was left open for the supernatural?
No, methodological natural would be that view. Not
Oh,
metaphysical
okay.
naturalism. Metaphysical naturalism is the idea that all things are going to be reducible to a natural state. Methodological naturalism is a view that is regarding scientific endeavor.
Are you arguing that things cannot be reduced to a natural state?
Well, I think certain things can, but I don't think minds can be reduced to natural.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you can demonstrate a
I
mind
would-
without a
I would
brain, I will
disagree.
totally
Why would-
100% agree.
I
Well, I
would
don't know. I
disagree,
don't-
and the reason why I would
couldn't
disagree is because when someone dies, and we stick them in the ground, their brain, their mind turns into
But you're arguing against something else. You're not arguing against dualism, right? Because as I was trying to explain, the reason why it's even called dualism is because they're trying to say that there's a physical aspect of the mind, but there's also a part of the mind that doesn't have a spatial extension, i.e., it's immaterial, right? And so what I'm saying is,
and,
so what
and
they're,
I've heard that
hold on.
argument, and I'm saying
Oh, I
demonstrate
didn't.
it,
Okay.
and I'll.
So you're just going to
Okay.
overtalk because I wasn't finished, right? And so,
Demonstrate. Demonstrate it.
so in order for you to, so what the dualist wants to argue is that in order for you to have beliefs which are going to be construed in terms of the mental, you're going to have the physical, right? And so, like, if you affect
No,
the
don't give me their argument. Give me yours.
I'm not talking about an argument. I'm just saying I'm expressing the view so that we don't have any confusion, so we don't bring up irrelevant stuff that doesn't have anything to do with it.
Right, but I mean, it's easy to straw man somebody and then kick that.
Well, that's what I'm trying to
easily
do.
made straw man down.
Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. That's why I'm
Well,
laying
that's a
out.
dishonest tactic. Steel man it. Make a really strong argument for the naturalistic worldview, the atheist naturalistic
No,
worldview.
he's just
And then-
he's just
and then-
laying
then
out
go-
the view so as not to it not get straw manned. That's what he's doing.
Exactly.
Right? He's just avoiding any straw man's being built by
Okay, I see.
laying out the view at the moment.
Exactly right. And
It's
so
kooky, but
My suggestion there would be a bit more precise with your words, because when he said you're setting up a straw man, you went, "Yes, I am," or rather than, "Yeah,
No,
I'm
no.
trying to
Agreed with
avoid." Whereas I'm trying to avoid that was what you were trying to say.
yeah,
well, I
it's
thought I
just-
said that, but if I didn't say that, then I'm
Okay.
just go ahead.
right. So the idea is that, so you saying that if someone dies, right, they're not going to have any beliefs. Is it going to be an argument in the case for naturalism, right, or an argument against the contrary, which is dualism, right? Because the dualist is going to accept that, right? Because they say that in order for you to have beliefs, right, you're going to have the physical. So if the physical goes away, then you no longer have beliefs because there's a dependency relation between the two. So bringing up people dying and them not being conscious or having mental content isn't going to be an objection.
Yeah.
I mean, again, so what does that bring to the table?
Well, what's being brought to the table is things, normative mental states like beliefs, goals, and desire, are going to be immaterial, right? That's
No,
what's being,
I've objected to that, and I will hold to that objection.
Well, what's
until
the
you can
argument?
demonstrate otherwise.
what's
The
What's
your
the
argument
argument?
objection?
is that the mind requires a brain. You've conceded that with dualism. I've shown you that those thoughts and desires have a physical location. They're in your brain. They're in your neurons. They're in your
That's just a
synapses.
claim. What's the argument for that claim?
That you get a rail spike through your brain and it changes who you are.
But I've
That's
already
physical.
laid out. But I've already laid out.
But if
that
under
is-
dualism, your soul, the immaterial, spaceless, timeless thing that exists with Sans brain, would not be affected by that.
it's not going to be timeless because the beliefs are going to be construed in terms of content, concrete objects. So it wouldn't be
I
timeless.
don't know how you can
I'm
have
not-
something that
I'm not-
exists without
I'm
space,
not-
but has time.
I'm not
but
arguing.
a
I'm not
physicist.
arguing. I'm not arguing for substance dualism, right? Or I'm not arguing for the existence of the soul, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just
So
saying
that's
that
why I
take
asked you to make
What
your
are you
argument. What
Well,
are
hang
you
on.
arguing?
Let's just get things straight, just so I know where you're going here. Okay, if you say that naturalism doesn't explain it, what do you think does explain it?
dualism. Obviously, because that's the position
That
I'm
doesn't
arguing.
actually tell me anything at all.
Well, look, the idea.
I don't know dualism, so please enlighten me on how your system works, whereas mine doesn't.
Well, I'm saying that beliefs are going to be dependent on the physical, right? But beliefs are going to be separate, and that those beliefs are going to be immaterial, right? Are going to be normative states, right? And so I take normative states to be distinct from dispositions, right? Which would be things like neurons, your environment, genetics, things like that, right?
Okay,
Things
great.
that we take
Please
to be
demonstrate
physical.
that's the case then.
Well,
I
I
want to
can't.
hear. I want to hear. I want to hear
Well-
you talk without saying right.
Well,
To be
Sorry.
honest, I say you know a lot, so it's
yeah,
as-
well, you know, I'll try. But look, I can't demonstrate it, right? Because demonstration is only something you do in terms of like empirical matters, but we're talking about things that are metaphysical, so I can't demonstrate it.
Well, I mean,
But
my
metaphysical is not the
counter-argument is
physical,
you
so
can't
why would you
logic
believe in
something
that?
that it doesn't exist into existence.
But all I mean by metaphysical is conception. Naturalism is a metaphysical view. So you are engaging in metaphysics if you're claiming to be a natural.
Well, not methodological naturalism.
We're not
Obviously.
talking about methodological
Right,
naturalism, so
right.
there'd be no point of bringing that up.
Well, just so they're not confused, because we did just go over this half an hour ago.
Yeah.
In
I mean,
fact, yeah, what we're talking about is strictly metaphysical naturalism.
Sure, but I guess where the concepts can be conflated, where I guess where the rubber meets the road, is that yes, you can argue this extra layer of needless complexity when we already have a pretty good, physical model, a working understanding of a lot of various brain functions, and our knowledge is expanding and increasing every day. So I think it's a weird hill to die on when it gets just another God of the gaps fallacy. Eventually we're going to figure out everything in the brain and how it works, and we're going to probably be able to copy it or upload it digitally or whatever, because it's just a physical thing that just so happens to create complex thought.
Well, I don't see why God of the gaps is going to be an objection, because you're still bringing up notions of epistemology, but we're talking about metaphysics.
Okay, so like fundamentally, what is the difference if I describe something very well to the point where I could reproduce it, and the concept?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Okay, so say I have a thought in my head, like a platonic, in the platonic sense, like I have this idealized thought in my head of a concept that also has a physical analog, and I can make a conceptual model in my head so well that I could reproduce that object physically.
This is bizarre, referring to platonic objects while claiming naturalism.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Well,
I'm more confused.
I'm sorry. I was just proffering a thought experiment. So I'm
Yep.
high. I
No
apologize.
problem.
I don't think I understand the thought experiment.
And that's fine. I don't love you either. That's cool.
Well, ask me what you don't understand on my view, and I can explain it for you.
Well, you said that the naturalistic worldview, or the atheistic naturalistic worldview, is incoherent, not incomprehensible to you. You said it was incoherent.
Yeah.
So far, you haven't laid out like any rationale for that. I've heard that argument before, or that claim before, and I just say so. Like,
Right.
so you think it's incoherent? I
Well,
look at it from the. You might have missed this part of the conversation earlier. I said that if you add God to our already complex system, I think you're overly complicating it. I think if you have an already complex system,
well, we're not
needlessly
talking about God
complicating it
yet. I just want to be
further.
clear. We're not talking about God. That's a
Right,
separate
but
argument.
okay, so dualism implies what in the metaphysical sense? A
Well,
soul?
dualism, that's substance dual. There's different types of dualism.
Okay. So yeah, I want to better understand your worldview.
Right.
What
I'm referring
type
to
of dualism are you talking about?
I'm referring to like something like that is going to be known as like perspectival dualism.
Whoa. I mean, why don't you
And
start with substance dualism?
Substance what he's talking about regarding the soul is going to be something that a substance dualist is going to argue, but I don't think substance dualism makes it.
Right.
You have, just to go through, you have substance dualism, you have property dualism, propositional dualism, perspectival dualism, supervenience dualism. But the central but each one of these views has in common is that the reason why they're called dualism is that they're trying to say that there's some property, or there's something that is separate from, let's say, another. And so in theory of mind, and since these are concepts and related to like theory of mind, the dualist wants to say that there's some property of the mind that is immaterial, but is in relation to like the physical properties of the mind.
Well, I mean, I guess I could get behind that I mean, in essence, I mean, yeah, I mean, you're right. You can't like weigh a thought. I mean, but it's the same thing as like digital code on a hard drive, right? Like that's
JJ, you're
separate
thinking about the same thing I'm thinking of.
It's an emergent property. It floats on top. It's not. It's an ephemeral soap bubble that only works when power is being run through the system. You turn off that power, and all those immaterial thoughts go away. I don't think there's anything else. You know, does that jibe with can that jibe with dualism?
Sure, I understand. Like, it seems like what you're espousing there is emergentism, right? Which is which can be a type, which can be something that a dualist holds to. So, I don't think there's going to be any issue. But if I could explain it a bit more, to make it make sense, what I'm particularly arguing is that I'm making a distinction between dispositional states, and I'll define. A dispositional state is a state that's going to be things that relate to your environment, or to put it simply, it's going to be things that follow law-like relations. So dispositions, by definition, are going to be things that are physical. But things I take to be normative are things that don't follow law-like relations. They're going to be things that have the potential to fail, because that's what normativity implies, right? It's just being in or out of accord with a standard. And so my dualism makes a distinction between normative states, and things that constitute normative states in the mind are going to be things like beliefs, goals, and desires. And things that are going to be construed as dispositions or physical parts of the mind are going to be things like your environment, genetics, things like that, your brain, you know.
I don't understand how this system can work, because from my point of view, the mind and the body are part of the same thing. You know, that effectively what happens in my brain is neurotransmitters and receivers, which are effectively electrochemical signals.
Well, if that's your view, how do you account for normativity?
I don't know what do you mean by normativity?
Well, like I was saying,
failing. I mean, like,
well, I take things like feeling.
How do you account for things not being perfect? Do we live in a perfect world or a perfect universe?
I don't
Things fail all the time.
No, just
yeah. So
repeat it.
Yeah. So normativity is going to be things that a normative state is going to be something that you can either be in or out of accord with. Have you ever heard the term like moral norm, right? So let's bring up something like a moral norm, because a moral norm is easy to talk about. A moral norm is a norm as a moral that you can either be in or out of accord with, right? So like an institutional norm, right, would be things like societal norms. So like the societal norms, let's say of like North America, right, are going to be different from the societal norms like in like Asia, presumably, right?
Okay, that's just like cultural things.
Right, exactly. So a norm is something
institutional norms.
Right. So norms are going to be things that you're going to be in or out of accord with, right? So that means if I want to be in accord with like American norms, then I ought follow the societal rules of America. But if I don't want to follow the societal rules of America, then I ought not be in accordance with that norm. Right?
Okay, but in all these senses, it sounds exactly the same thing as what happens in every other person's brain, because effectively you calculate things based upon your judgment, based upon your past experiences, all those sorts of things. You know, why is slavery wrong? Because I don't want to be a slave myself. Simple thing like that.
Right. And
those are just thoughts which are electrochemical signals that occur in the brain, and that is completely physical.
But that's what I'm saying doesn't make any sense to the view, right? Because when we're talking about norms like in the brain, in the mind, right, we're talking about like beliefs and desires and things like that. And so if beliefs and desires are normative, that means that
they're chemical.
Well, hold on. That means that they have the potential to fail, right? And so if they have the potential to fail, how can they be physical? Because when you say that something's physical, that means they have to follow a law-like relation. Which means
well, it does, because if a neurotransmitter, give me a sec, please. If a neurotransmitter and the receiver, if the receiver isn't working as so to speak, a stroke in that little tiny aspect, that part of that cell in the brain, the receiving part of the neurotransmitter pairing, then the physical, connection between them doesn't happen anymore. The brain can work around that as well, by the way, which is what people who have strokes. Well, hang on, I haven't finished yet. But these thoughts are still neurotransmitters and receivers working, and if they don't work, okay, they don't work. That's also how the brain works. That's still a part of the a naturalistic perception, reality.
So,
is it not?
Well, no, I don't think so, because I think
you don't think that if a neural receiver and its paired transmitter, if that part isn't working, that is just an explanation of there's a bit that failed.
Right, sure. Like all you're saying is like if I consume alcohol or get intoxicated, then my beliefs and the way I perceive the world is going. That's not going to, like I said,
I disagree. Your beliefs don't change. It's only your impulse of whether you should say the belief that you have.
Wait, you don't think that if I consume like DMT, or if I are under the influence of some sort of drug, that can change my beliefs? Like, you haven't heard accounts of people taking DMT and they believe in God now. Like, you haven't heard of
You're
them?
more charming when you're drunk.
That's an extreme
Come on,
reaction
man.
to that molecule. Yeah,
Come on now.
I'll grant you that.
You
know,
just
that
said
was
verbatim,
cause
beliefs don't
hallucination.
change with drugs. He gave you
That doesn't make
examples.
any.
Okay, and I say I'll grant you that DMT can give you like a religious experience. It's a really weird molecule that they're still doing a
And
lot
you
of
don't
studies
think
on.
people act upon those experiences? Like, I know people who've taken
I don't
DMT
think it
and
changes your
believe in
beliefs for
higher.
the rest of your life or anything. I think while you're on it,
Why would that be relevant?
Well, I mean,
Okay.
you're perfectly right that things can get beliefs that change. I think I maybe spoke a bit too soon. I correct myself in that regard. And that belief can be simple. That was cool. I'd like to do that again. Whereas before, I didn't want to do that.
Well, look, all I'm saying, right, is that when we talk about, like, imagine if I was to say that, because I strike a match, due to like various physical laws, right, that match is going to like light up, right, when I strike that match due to various physical laws. It would be weird to say that the match failed when it didn't light, right? Or like the earth failed to like revolve around the sun.
Well,
right?
hang on. There's a
That's the-
problem though, because when you strike the match, if the match didn't work, then you can find reasons why the match didn't work. Maybe the the chemicals that they
that's
mix together
irrelevant. I
on the match
understand
head.
that. I'm not confused by that, right? I'm just saying that we don't typically tend to use normative language when referring to like physical states of affairs.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you believe, or would you consider feelings to be natural?
No, I take them to be qualitative.
All right, you're talking way over my head. I don't even know what you. I don't even know.
Sorry. I take feelings to be non-propositional.
Okay, do they have a natural source? Do they come from somewhere inside your body?
I don't know.
Can they
You
be
don't know.
explained by the natural sciences?
They might. I'm not too knowledgeable in qualia.
I mean, this
Okay.
this sounds like, I don't know. This just sounds like a really weird argument to have.
Well,
know,
he's bringing up things like feelings and stuff like that. We're not talking about feelings, because
Yeah,
feelings.
but what
No,
are
we're
feelings?
talking. No, hold on.
You were talking
The
about-
reason I asked that question was naturalism earlier.
What?
Then you're.
What?
Say it again. You broke up.
Sorry. The reason I brought up natural is because you were talking about naturalism earlier, and that so
feelings are different from what I'm talking about, right? Because I'm talking about beliefs, and beliefs are going to be true fact, right? Which means they're going to be propositional. But when you talk about feelings are going to be non-propositional.
where do feelings come from? Are feelings physical?
They might. Not sure.
For someone who is, isn't sure about things, you seem to be making some rather sure positions about what you believe to be the case.
Well, I'm talking. Well, I'm not, I'm talking about a completely entirely different topic. That's like someone saying that you're really knowledgeable in like
Look,
mathematics.
I don't
right?
know who's going to be the next president of the United States, but I know for sure it's not going to be Oprah Winfrey, right? The idea that like he's saying, look, it's definitely not Oprah Winfrey. You come in saying, oh, look, for somebody who doesn't know who the next president's going to be, you sure know an awful lot about it not being Oprah Winfrey. Like you could know that it's not the case, that something is not the case, even if you don't know what is the case.
Right. And typically, I think what we're talking about is it's not natural if it can't be described or explained by the natural sciences.
Yeah, and so when you came in and said that the atheistic naturalistic worldview was incoherent, I still don't understand why it's incoherent.
Well, the idea is that normative states are going to be things that are non-physical, right? And
I
so things
disagree.
like, well, what's the argument?
Because all the beliefs that you have is, directly related to your brain firing, neurotransmitters and receivers.
That's just a question.
It is purely a physical thing.
That's a fallacious argument, but you just
How? How is it fallacious for me to say that you're trying to say that these things are separate, and I'm trying to say no, they're not separate. They are contained within a brain.
I gave reasons for why we would think they're separate, right? But you're just saying no, that's not the case. It is the case that they're physical, which would be question begging.
No, it isn't, because it's demonstrable. It is demonstrable because you. Hang on.
Well, I don't understand why you're still bringing up demonstrability, right? Because we're talking about a metaphysical concept, not a.
Why would you talk about metaphysics when we're talking about physics?
Talking about naturalism, right, which is a metaphysical view.
Well,
Unless
as far
you're
as I'm
talking
concerned,
about-
naturalism isn't naturalism what is nature?
Yeah, that's a.
What is natural? The natural world is the real world?
When you talk about naturalism and physicalism, you're trying to answer a metaphysical question regarding the nature of reality. What things are comprised of, right? And so making the claim that all things are reducible to the natural is a metaphysical claim. Now you can talk about notions of epistemology,
okay.
right? Which would be notions like empiricism or rationalism, right? But you're talking about naturalism.
Hold on.
I think he'd have to demonstrate that the natural world isn't rational in order to be able to demonstrate it. To sustain that claim.
Wait, what do you mean? I didn't make a claim.
Sorry?
What claim? I don't understand what claim you're claiming.
Which claim?
You're claiming that the naturalism doesn't work.
Yeah. I can't. Well, I'm saying that naturalism can't account for like beliefs and desires.
I've already demonstrated that it can. That the brain has neurotransmitters and receivers, and it is the relationship between the two which is what forms thoughts, feelings, concepts of touch, etc., etc. Although all those things, the way that we act and believe things is purely based upon natural.
Well, that's hardly a demonstration.
Yeah, and plus, I don't even know why you're still bringing up demonstration when we already talked about we're not talking about scientific matters, we're talking about metaphysical matters. So it's just very weird. It's just like they're not listening.
Abstract theory with no basis in reality. If it hasn't got a basis in reality, then it's not real.
Wait, that's just going to be question begging again, because how do you know that metaphysics doesn't have any basis in reality?
Because that's what the word metaphysics means.
Why is everyone flying off the handle? Let's all take a breath.
Calm down.
One at a time, please.
It's like you say. It's like your argument is not when you're basically saying, oh well, it's metaphysical. Well, metaphysics is an abstract theory with no basis in reality. If it hasn't reality, then it isn't a thing. It's not even a thing.
Theory.
Whereas what goes on in the brain is electrical impulses, electrochemical reactions, which is real.
You just don't seem very informed on the topic, right? Because metaphysics, by definition, are things that describe reality or the nature of it. So for you to say that the metaphysics has no basis in reality, seems like you don't understand the issue.
Well,
I may not.
Well,
Actually.
it's
just
it's just a philosophical worldview. A philosophical worldview's basis in reality is only that it exists in your mind and in the collective conscious of others.
It
Okay,
just seems like
It
you're
has
talking
no-
about nominalism.
it has no existence outside of the human brain. If
What
you
doesn't?
remove all the
Yeah, what
humans
is he,
from the
what are you
planet
talking
Earth,
about?
I
all
don't
the
know.
Do you understand
philosophy,
what he's saying,
Thought-
Seth?
Slow
he's
down.
talking- he's saying-
Slow down.
metaphysics.
He's saying that thoughts
metaphysics
and feelings and things like that have no existence
come
outside
from
of
the brain.
What?
Metaphysics comes from the brain.
Seth, do you
What are you
understand
talking-
what this guy's
No,
saying?
I've not a clue. I don't think he
How-
didn't realize. I think I
Do-
think what
do
he's
I
trying
need,
to
do I
say-
need to repeat a very
Whoa,
simple
guy, can
statement
you
one more
calm
time?
down? Whoa,
Metaphysics
I heard
comes
you.
from the brain.
Why do
Wow.
you say that?
Why do I say it? Because the mind comes from the brain, and metaphysics
Why do you
comes
say-
from thought.
Why do you say the mind comes from the brain?
Because you cannot demonstrate a mind without a brain. If a brain is damaged
So
and it changes the mind of the brain's occupant, owner, whatever,
but this is just
this is just what? Lobotomies aren't a real thing?
no, it's just like an
He's
argument
describing
from ignorance.
supervenience, which is a prevailing view that most neuroscientists hold, right? Whatever we're talking
it's-
about when
your
we say
party's over,
there's
guys.
mental content,
I
the
don't know.
mental content we're
Guys.
describing is supervenient from the brain, right? So any change in the mental content has a corresponding change in the brain.
Get my pillow and my blankie. Snuggle up for a nap now.
Oh man, fun's over.
I'm comfy. Keep going, X.
Daddy's
So
home.
are you pretending you don't know what supervenience
Put-
is, or you
put
couldn't
the
give like
bong
a
or-
charitable account of what he just said?
Put the bong away, guys.
Did you seriously forget what supervenience was, Yuri, or were
I-
you
I
just
know-
pretending the ignorance to piss him off?
Of course not. No, this is.
You
this
would never
we're-
do
we're
that
just-
for rhetorical purposes, would you, Yuri? You'd never just pretend not to know the position the other person is describing.
It's
All right,
still,
guys.
I would assume you're
In
being
the
a good
flat
faith
Earth, in the flat
interlocutor.
Earth community, they call that being a Poe.
No, that's not what this is. No.
Or
This is just-
dishonest
that's
interlocutor.
what
it's
Seth just said is accurate.
It's just eventually we get to all the views. Supervenience, I don't know. It's kind of kooky anyway, but it is just an argument from ignorance.
You think it's ignorant to say that all changes in mental states have corresponding brain state change?
No, I don't think that's all he's saying, though.
It just seems like you can be. That's not going to be incompatible with a dualist thesis. I mean, even if you're saying that, that's not going to be.
That's just like a flat earther co-opting
Look,
observations
I don't
for
find that
globe
interesting,
and then
man.
saying, "Oh, they totally work on a flat Earth too." No, there is no. That's my point. Is from a naturalistic worldview, it is entirely.
Why are you
coherent.
bringing up flat
my
Earth?
counter, my
What
counter
flat Earth?
argument, okay, my counter argument is that the natural worldview, naturalistic worldview, is entirely coherent because the mind is an emergent property of the brain. If you change the base architecture of the brain after a certain amount of time elapses where brain plasticity doesn't come into play anymore and those neurons can't change their formation to house new memories or whatever, the brain's architecture is necessary for there to be these ephemeral thoughts and things that don't have.
I understand what you're saying.
One second. Okay,
So
I
you
just-
can't
can-
understand those words, but you could understand
no.
words like supervenient. I mean, I think you're
No, I
being
just-
a little intellectually dishonest here, man.
No. I just want to know if you could demonstrate that the mind is an emergent property of the brain.
Yes, I can. It's called lobotomy. You have a lobotomy, a lot of times it changes your mind,
Or a stroke.
or a stroke, or any kind of
Changes-
massive head trauma.
The people that have
Changes your
had
mind.
the people that have had bicycle, motorbike, car accidents, whatever, they've had brain trauma, and suddenly they don't like strawberries anymore, and they like something they never used to.
Well, let me ask you a
So-
question,
They
Yuri. Is
completely
there
change personality, like that dude that got a railroad spike through his brain and then lived like another 20 years
Right,
afterwards.
but people change those things without railroad spikes, without lobotomies.
His name is Phineas Gage.
Yuri? Is there any neuroscience involved in your philosophy of mind?
What now?
I'm asking Yuri a question
Oh, sorry.
because Danny famously said there's no neuroscience involved in my philosophy of mind. Do you agree with that position, Yuri? Do you think that philosophy of mind is purely a metaphysical question? Oh, he's deafened. Never mind. Sorry, I thought he was here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to say that's true. Not that you can't have neuroscience involved.
It seems
I don't think
to
that's
me
that absurd. Children
it's-
perform philosophy of mind, and they don't do it with any neuroscience.
right, but we're not asking them for authoritative answers to these questions, right? So
Right.
it seems like the discipline of cognitive science is what I take it to be the subject, not just philosophy of mind. Because if we're not considering all the disciplines involved and what they have to say and how they relate to each other, we're not going to really get to anything like an understanding based on the best knowledge that humanity has to bear at the moment, right? We're just kind of picking one straw out of a cup and saying, look, I have the answer to everything. It's not sufficient to deal with the problem. So here's my basic complaint about what Yuri and Danny and Jack and others seem to be saying. They seem to be saying that, look, I have this firsthand experience, and I can best linguistically express and explain that in this folk psychological language of intentionality, beliefs, etc. And I don't want any scientists getting me mad or getting me pissed. They're basically doing the insane clown posse response to
I
neuroscience.
feel like the opposite was happening a minute ago.
Okay. Well, the basic rejection of neuroscience and the insistence that the absolute facts of mind are only to be understood from the first person perspective is extremely limiting, right? So when he says physicalism cannot provide an account for intentionality, what he's claiming is that first of all, he doesn't really even want to hear anything about evidentiary stuff or about the brain. So he's saying, look, unless you can make a purely metaphysical argument, I'm not interested. Meanwhile, the cognitive science disciplines that interrelate are doing things like heterophenomenological investigation, meaning they're looking at third person and first person accounts simultaneously. They're taking the first person account seriously, but they're comparing it with what appears to be supervening, whatever that mental state is the person's reporting, right? So when we look at the brain and we see that there is a neural network which is wired in response to a certain stimuli, and we see that when new stimuli come in that don't yet have neural networks that are wired to respond to them, that the flat, unformed architecture of the brain finds a new set of neurons that become wired to that input that now respond to it. That's what we're talking about when we say that people are experiencing intentionality, right? If I say it is light or it is dark, or I am doing what I want or I am not doing what I want, there is a neural network that corresponds to that, or a network of networks, which is either firing or not. Now, you can reject that and say, look, that's just not a metaphysical claim. It doesn't touch on my philosophy of mind. But the question is, can physicalism provide an account for intentionality? And we're providing an account for what corresponds with what he's calling intentionality. And he can say, oh, it just doesn't answer my question. It's just a metaphysical claim, all he wants. Meanwhile, the field of cognitive science moves on with trying to understand what we call intentionality from both perspectives. So it doesn't seem possible to have a really well-informed philosophy of mind that is rejecting the other sort of prongs of the problem.
I think you need to bust out the blender, Seth.
Oh, I don't know if Yuri was really talking too much about philosophy of mind. He was talking more about metaphysics. But I haven't done philosophy of mind in a long time. I mean, I read when I last talked to you about it with the whole blender thought experiment. I just got done reading like a couple of books on it, so I was like really hyped up and really aware of all the arguments, and I'm not right now.
No, hey, 9 or IX.
Yeah,
Actually, his name is Turd
Are
Ferguson.
you still there?
yeah. You can call me X. Go ahead.
It's a funny
Hey,
name.
didn't you just give a rebuttal to Yuri's metaphysical argument?
He's deafened right now, so he couldn't hear it.
No, but that's. I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying.
Yeah, that was my intention.
Okay, right on. That was
And by
very well said, and I
Right.
followed most of it.
right, and in case anyone's going to accuse me of a performative contradiction or something, when I say that was my intention, what I mean is that I experienced the belief that I intended to do that, right? But what actually correlates to that is a series of neural networks that correspond to that, which are either firing or not firing in response to stimuli that matches or doesn't match the kind of stimuli which will cause them to fire.
Holy shit!
I mean,
Right
if you
on.
just explain it in terms of a single synapse, it may be insufficient for someone to get why intentionality is actually entailed by it, right? If you explain to someone what a neural network is, which is the sum of a set of related synapses that all form a given network system. So let's focus on whatever you can see in front of you. You're going to see sailboat, trees, and deer, my own hand, etc. Right? The reason is that there is a network that corresponds to each of those things, which is trained to recognize it as a particular concept, right? And we can literally map that. If we show you a YouTube video, we can map which networks correspond to which image. And imagine something, or you watch another YouTube video where we can't see what you're watching, we can look at your brain and reproduce a murky but fairly accurate picture of what you are seeing, because we understand well enough what particular neural networks do corresponding to particular visual stimuli. So that's only the same. The perceptual system is not structures of thought, but it's still a profound demonstration. Explains the belief we're not seeing a thing. Starts with the neural network, which either corresponds or doesn't correspond to the stimuli. And if someone thinks that they don't need to understand what neural networks are to form, I just don't understand how it could be an informed position at this point. It's like saying time of Newton. You could be philosophy of science that didn't entail any knowledge of quantum mechanics, right? Because they didn't know better. And that's a defensible position at the time, right? But I don't think you could be like a serious philosopher of science today without understanding quantum physics. Because it has implications like, what are our deepest theories and so on. I don't know.
But
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think the place to start when you're talking is taking the intent approach to try to debunk physicalism is to explain how neural networks correspond to stimuli, right? So perception leads to active attitudes about those stimuli, and there's no reason to it's not neural network.
So nothing Turd said so far would disagree with naturalism. Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm a naturalist, yeah. And a physicalist about the brain. But I understand the kind of skepticism to an extent that Belgrami and other philosophers have, because they're approaching it from a linguistic perspective, right? Their analytic philosophical toolkit tells them only to believe in a kind of mathematical way on paper. And so they don't want to inclusion set of observations seem to suggest, which contradicts something that seems to them sacred and obvious from a linguistic perspective, right? It's like if I told you that 2 + 2 is 5, you would not believe it. Like if I just said, oh no, there's things about the brain, you would be justified in being skeptical, right? Because it sounds like a bullshit deal, right? They think fundamentally the way that and all of that, and that that it's threatened by what they think is a mis, and they're kind of like staking out their territory. From the, structure explains and supervenes the mind state that you're experiencing. It just seems obvious that whatever disagreement there is between the two disciplines are, the reductive account is going right. Like if I undergo a psychological test and you watch my brain during it, and I report some illusion which you can demonstrate as false to me, I don't and like insist on a solid that what I saw was absolutely real because it felt real. Something. No cling to them about neuroscience just because our philosophy of mind seems to be opposed to it from a anyway. Yuri's not here to hold. Sorry.
Well, I enjoyed chatting with you guys.
Yeah.
Later,
nice talking
JJ.
to you. No, that was no.
Oh, sorry, man.
It's all.
So I see Preferred joined. Did he come to talk about presuppositionalism?
Well, I wanted to know if y'all agreed on what the definition of atheism was.
No. That's one of the deepest mysteries of the universe, JJ.
Atheism includes any philosophy which claims that no God or gods exist, including any rational reasoning creator of the universe.
What about agnostics?
Agnosticism is incoherent.
Whoa! What?
It's a
How
true
is
contradiction,
that?
JJ. It's a true contradiction, don't you know?
I hope I'm about to find out.
It's a dichotomy, right?
Drop me some. Yeah, Ix. Drop me some knowledge, Preferred.
Yeah, it's agnosticism is atheism light.
Is your name Colin by any chance?
No,
How
it's
so?
just Preferred.
All right.
Could you explain that to me, please, Preferred?
Yeah, you have to reference God as all facts, right? So you can't be neutral towards that because you have to acknowledge the external physical world to be true, which is a fact, which doesn't reference God in your atheist worldview or agnosticism light. So that's why it's a contradiction in terms.
Wait, one more time. Walk me through this. So agnosticism is incoherent because what?
Yeah, to be an atheist agnostic, you have to recognize the external physical world to be true. So that's a fact, and that fact is not referencing God as its irreducible primary. So therefore, they're rejecting God and not neutral.
What's the contradiction? Just saying they're neutral, but they're not neutral?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound.
There is no neutrality. You cannot be neutral about the existence of God. Either you are with him or against him.
Well, you mean you're either with them or you're not with them?
Right. Against him would be any other worldview than the Christian worldview.
So isn't that begging the question?
No, it's not begging the question because God is an irreducible primary. So there's nothing greater that we could verify God by except for himself. So he's a self-revelatory, self-authenticating God.
Oh, it's Preferred.
Yep.
Hey, Preferred, how's it going?
Good. Just another day of proving atheism is false.
Oh, how'd you do that?
Oh, I just explained it.
He did.
Oh, I missed it. God.
I'm no longer an atheist. I'm a Christian.
So, I mean,
now.
it could be the case that there could be some like ultimate like source of like revelation or whatever, but like it's also possible that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's not what God says, so I reject that.
And you are begging the question.
I like
No,
that
it's not
Jesus.
the question because God is the ultimacy of reality
God
that
said it.
provides the necessary preconditions for intelligibility, and without Him, we couldn't know anything.
Why do I need one of
So,
those?
so God, because God.
I don't think that's. I don't
Yeah,
think that's
God
true.
verifies Himself. It's a virtuous
It's not
circle.
circular at all.
No, it is circular. It's a virtuous.
Oh, virtuous circular logic. The one
Yeah.
time it's gotcha. What's that called? Special pleading?
No, that's called the Christian worldview.
He just said the Christian worldview is special pleading.
No, I was clearing up the definition of virtuous.
Preferred. Come on, you walked right into that one. Just own that one.
Well, it was a little bit of a troll response. I knew.
Oh, hey, Benna.
Hey,
How you
y'all.
doing?
No, not
Hey,
Bennett. Oh, that guy sucks. Hey,
Did-
Bennett.
Did you know that Benna Berry is timeless, spaceless, and what's the other one? He's at least those
Immaterial?
two things.
I don't exist? What are you trying to say?
No, that's not what I meant. Eternal. Benna Berry is eternal.
How do you know that?
Isn't that the same as timeless?
No, it's not. There's a distinction.
All right.
I'd rather not have to make the distinction, though.
I don't blame you.
So, Preferred, can you explain how you can prove the impossibility of the contrary worldview?
Yeah, Christianity, because God revealed Himself in such a way that we could not be wrong about it. And then He has special revelation in the Bible that gives us the path towards salvation.
So, if you have three different people who interpret the Bible differently, what's your guaranteed cannot be wrong mechanism for differentiating the correct interpretation?
Yeah, there's only one way to interpret the Bible, and that's literally.
So when Jesus said that you judge a tree by its fruit, He meant trees and fruits, not people, right?
No, there's still metaphors within the Bible.
Hold on a second,
but
but that's literal.
No, I meant literal, but there still can be metaphors and things within the Bible.
So not literal. So but that's exactly the trick, to find out what's metaphor and what's literal.
Well, it's easy to know what's literal.
You just said the only way to interpret the Bible is literal. Well, I just interpreted Jesus' claim about trees and fruits as literal, and you said I was wrong. So apparently there's multiple ways to interpret the Bible. You can take the trees and fruits as a metaphor, or you can take it as literal.
Back up the mic just a tad, Seth.
It's very clear what is metaphorical and what is not. So
it's clear.
Oh, it is. It is. To who?
Yeah. To anyone that has reading comprehension.
You're killing me, man.
Reading comprehension of like ancient languages?
Yeah, the Bible.
Hey, Ace.
Yeah, I don't see this as a problem. I mean, you could say that Jesus literally said a metaphor.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Ace.
Well, that's true, isn't it, Seth?
It's true that that if you say something like the only way to interpret the Bible is literal, and then you find metaphors, you've contradicted yourself.
Right, but you could say that it's a literal metaphor.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would refer to.
What the?
Like what, a metaphorical metaphor?
That's not what I said. Now you're being silly, Seth.
Well, I'm trying to figure out why you wouldn't say that. What would be a metaphorical metaphor?
I don't know. Why are you bringing that up? We're talking about a literal metaphor.
Well, because if something is, if we're talking about literal metaphors, that must imply that there must be non-literal metaphors. And what would that be? A metaphorical metaphor?
Yeah,
Do such things exist? What would one look like?
I don't know. You're changing the subject, though.
You couldn't have a metaphorical text where there's like another metaphor inside of it.
I'm sure one can, but I'm just curious on what one would look like.
Be virtuously metaphoric.
Before I make, sweeping statements about its absurdity, I want to explore the topic a little bit. Is it absurd to say literal metaphor? I don't know. What's a metaphorical metaphor?
It's not absurd, but it doesn't get preferred off the hook. That's what you should be focusing on, Seth.
Yeah, I think that's a lot closer to the
Preferred.
Well, there's a difference between literal and lateral. So
What, like a letter? Right. What about all the contradictions? Come on. Some of you must
there's
know
no
some of the-
contradictions in the Bible.
Some of you must know all the contradictions in the Bible.
Yeah, those are atheist trolls that post those contradictions and YouTube videos. All
Are
of
you
them
fair-
can be.
Huh?
Go ahead. Sorry. All of
Oh,
them.
no.
Go ahead.
What about there's this my favorite one is, maybe you could help me out here. There's a verse of the Bible that says God is love, not that God is loving, God is love. And then there's a verse of the Bible that says love is not jealous, and then there's a verse in the Bible that says God is jealous. So you want to square that one?
Oof.
Yeah, what's the verse?
Sounds like a
Do
toughie.
you deny these verses exist? I mean, I could find them if you'd like, but I'm walking right now. Are you going to deny that there's a verse the Bible says God that says God is love?
No, there's definitely verses like that.
Right. So there's a verse in the Bible that says God is love. So there you go. Now let's move on to the next one. Right. Are you aware that there's a verse in the Bible that says God is a jealous God? Do you deny or accept that we can find a verse in the Bible that says God is a jealous God?
Finding out. Oh. Yeah, there is.
Yeah, absolutely there is. Okay. Now, what about the verse in the Bible that says love is not jealous?
It's a metaphor.
Yeah, it's just a metaphor.
Good boy, preferred. Wow, that's sad.
So it sounds like you have a magic way of telling what's a metaphor and what's literal.
Yeah,
Would you describe that
like
as
when
you
you
know
read
it when you see it? Is that your method? You know it when you see it?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're reading a sports page, are you taking that literal? Like when sports writer used the word like annihilated, crush. Like, are you taking that literal?
Yeah.
Yeah, we know the difference between literal and hyperbole. Do you think it's a hyperbole to say that love is not jealous? That's a hyperbole?
Oh no, that's one example. There's many other examples.
Example of what?
Other
Example of
forms
what?
of figurative
Hyperbole?
writing. There's other
Of what?
examples of forms of figurative
Well,
writing.
what's the metaphor for love is not jealous? What's that a metaphor for?
Hold on a second. I'm not sure he even knows the difference between figurative and literal at this point. Literal?
It's a literal metaphor.
It's a figurative metaphor.
So, well, literally, it's a figurative metaphor.
It's 50-50.
Yeah, preferred.
It's just one of those issues when you translate from Hebrew into English. So it's just a translation thing there.
Thought you said earlier we didn't need to rely on any translations.
No, there's underlying text that you can use to help understand what the Bible is saying in English.
I thought all we had to do was be able to read. Earlier was your claim. Anybody who could read could do that.
Yeah, who has basic reading comprehension. Comprehension.
Well, where's the reading? Well, I'm confused. Again, I think I have basic reading comprehension. In what sense is love is not jealous a metaphor?
Well, there's three definitions of jealous. So when the passage in 1 Corinthians uses the It's translated at Greek, which means to burn with heat. So there's different translations within the underlying text. So
Whoa,
it's-
so whoa. You said it was a metaphor. Wait a minute. Now you're just saying that it's using a different, it's literal, but it's using a different definition of jealous.
yeah, there's 3 different.
Why would you? Whoa,
definitions.
I thought, well, this doesn't seem so simple anymore. First, you thought it was a metaphor. Do you have basic reading comprehension?
Oh yeah, I do. I
You
was
said
saying that-
everybody, anyone with a basic reading comprehension could tell what in the Bible is a metaphor and what's not. You just went back and forth on this being a metaphor. Why is
No, there's some cases where it is a metaphor, but there's other cases where it's just a
right. But
metaphor.
you said anyone with a basic reading comprehension could tell if it's a metaphor, but you apparently couldn't tell if this was a metaphor. You thought it was a metaphor, and then you immediately changed your mind.
I didn't know which Bible verses you were speaking of specifically, because there's some that are metaphors, but there's others are just the underlying text of translation. So,
Would you say that's a skill like interpretation that you have to bring to bear to understand?
Oh no.
yeah, you do have to study the Word of God if you want a deeper understanding. But
So
the
you know
base. Go ahead.
You know what hermeneutics entails, right?
Refresh.
It's the academic scholarly word for interpretation.
Of neutering Herman Cain.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, when you say that you just interpret it literally, what we would charitably take you to actually have meant, since you're backtracking a bit, is that you actually engage in an interpretation.
Yeah, like Greg Bahnsen wrote about hermeneutics.
Right. So since you're engaging in interpretation, if you and another person who both profess the Christian worldview disagree, let's say you and Bahnsen and Darth Dawkins and Christian Hillbilly and some other pre-suppers actually disagree about something, how are you going to resolve that dispute?
Hi, I'm sorry, this is probably going to go into something, and the stream's about to go offline, so feel free to continue talking about it, but I just wanted to let you know. Bye, everyone.